All right, what's good, YouTube's DEFCON TCG, and I'm here with some more GLC content. As you guys know, I play a lot of GLC, and the format is just a nice breath of fresh air, especially with how boring Standard is currently, with Dragapult just being the BDIF. So I'm back to playing some GLC at Good Games in Chicago, and there was a pretty big change to the format with the ban of Dimension Valley, which is seemingly a pretty good ban for Psychic, considering it makes your deck a little bit less aggressive. But I'm here to tell you that it is probably not even a top 5 card in Psychic. And while I disagree with the ban happening, I feel like Psychic sure is the best deck, but it's still by far the best deck even post-ban. And this is the list here that I used to go 4-0. This card hiding over here is the Counter Energy. And as you can see, this is the same list that I played to Full Grip. I just took out the Dimension Valley for this copy of Artisan. Now, my original thought was to play a copy of Viridian City. Now, Viridian City is going to be a supporter-based way of getting energy, because you can use something like Guzmahala to get Viridian Forest, which now grabs you an energy. So I thought that could be a neat way of just kind of having more discard outlets while also gaining another way of getting Psychic Energy out of the deck, or Psychic Energy out of the hand of the discard pile to use with something like the Malamar. So this is a list I played. I think this is the best 60 for Psychic. I think you could maybe play around with 1 or 2 cards, but I think this is the way to go. And yeah, we're just going to get right into the first game.
And you're going first.
Good luck.
Good luck.
Ooh, alright, we'll Psychic Mirror. Alright, now moving into game 1, it is seemingly a Psychic Mirror, but my opponent's deck has definitely a nice little twist to it. So my opening hand is pretty slow. I look at my prize cards and I'm thinking about what I want to grab. Looking here at my prize cards, I think this was the game. Let's see if I can go back a little bit more, if you can see. So this is the game. I believe I prize... Yeah, we see Iono here, Tag Call, Lily's Determination, and Arvin. So I prize a lot of pretty good supporters here in the opening, which is definitely not great considering I think my hand is not the greatest ever. So I'm hoping on this Mew to definitely grab me some more pieces that I might potentially need. But my hand is pretty strong in the opening as far as getting Pokemon into play. I get the 3 trio into play of the stage, or the basics that I need, the Ralts, the Xatu, and the Inkay, and then I'm able to attach a U-turn board to my Mew here, which is nice because now I can retreat this Mew if I need. And I see a Lily's Pokédoll, so I immediately think my opponent's playing some kind of control deck, and it actually ends up being a mill deck. Let me get rid of this bad boy. And so my opponent attaches Telepathic Energy, and they're going to be able to search their deck for 2 Psychic Pokemon to put them onto the bench. And this is really what's going to tell me here what my opponent's playing. They put down the Mew, so immediately very smart for my opponent. They're playing around that Blindside TM double prize card. But I think if I was my opponent here, I maybe would have just gone for another way to kind of further my board state. I think the Blindside isn't going to really come in immediately, so you don't have to put down the Mew right away. And there is the retreat into the Pokédoll. And the Hex Maniac, extremely mean from my opponent. I think just looking at my hand, yep, I'm going to get Pokepad. I'm going to search Curly out of my deck and just evolve. And there's really not much else I can do here, so I'm just going to pass back over. Hex Maniac, for you players that don't know, is an old supporter card down here that has the effect that if you play it, all abilities are negated until the end of your opponent's next turn. So basically, you do all your stuff, you play the Hex Maniac, and then going into my turn, all of my abilities are gone. So I was not able to use the Refinement on my Curlio or the Mysterious Tail on my Mew, therefore giving my opponent a free turn. So it's pretty much now like they went first. Or yeah, they basically just got an extra turn on me. And looking at my hand, I believe it's like Clara, Tina, Psychic Patch. So nothing super crazy here, but I can use the Curlia here to at least trade away the Tina to be able to draw 2 cards. Now, this Weezing has an attack that is going to be the exact same text as this card, Team Rocket's Handiwork. So Team Rocket's Handiwork says that you can flip 2 coins, and for each heads, your opponent mills the top 2 cards of their deck. So my opponent's going to hit double heads here. I'm going to mill 4 cards, milling my Malamar and a Dark Energy and the Strange Timepiece. Milling the Strange Timepiece basically means that this game, I'm probably not going to be able to use the blind side of my Natu, and then my opponent benches Giraffe Rig as well. So the Giraffe Rig is a pretty big deal here, because now that means if I leave something like Guzma in my discard pile, it's going to be significantly more difficult for me to recur it, because my opponent can use the Get Lost attack, which removes 2 cards from your discard pile and puts them into the Lost Zone. So I definitely have to be a lot more careful of what I put into the discard pile. So here off of the Mew, I'm able to get a Fog Crystal. Fog Crystal is going to be able to get me a basic Psychic Energy. So now I've used my Xatu to attach an energy to my Tina, and I actually do have a small misplay here. So I play this Clara, or I play Mysterious Treasure. Mysterious Treasure, it cannot grab me Malamar because my Malamar is in my discard pile. So I'm just going to grab Monkey Dory because I'm going to start doing this Tina Monkey Dory loop. I play this Clara, and I grab the Malamar, but I also grab the Psychic Energy out of my discard pile, where I could have used the Malamar to attach, and then I could have attached Return to Tina, and then I could have actually KO'd this Lily's Pokédoll. So instead, I just attach a Dark Energy to my Monkey Dory and then pass it over. And this is a little bit bad because I could have gotten this Lily's Pokédoll out of the active, as well as gotten 4 damage counters on one of my Pokemon, so then I could start moving damage counters over to my opponent's board. So then the Xatu gets played. I think the Xatu also has a mill attack. I think it's like you mill 2 on a coin flip or something. Or no, this one's even funnier. This one's you play rock, paper, scissors. The winner draws 3 cards and the loser mills cards. So it plays in your strategy either way, because if I win the rock, paper, scissors, I draw cards, so taking cards out of my deck. But if I lose, then I just mill cards out of my deck, and it's a win-win for my opponent. So this is definitely an interesting matchup. Not the matchup I expected that it was going to be, because, like I said, I am playing normal attacking Psychic. My opponent's playing Mill, but Psychic does go through its deck pretty quickly here, and that's going to be one of the things that is going to be a big weakness that my opponent is trying to exploit. The fact that I can use stuff like Refinement and my Mew to be able to get cards out of my deck. I get Versus Seeker here, which is a pretty good pull, so my opponent's only going to be able to remove that from my hand with something like Eerie. And then I'm going to attach an energy off of the Clairvoyant Sense, and then attach an energy for turn in the Telepathic, but my bench is already full, so I can't get any more guys. And then, yep, I'm going to use the Distortion Door here, put 4 damage counters on my Monkey Dory. So this is going to help me because now I can start attempting to pick off some of my opponent's benched Pokemon here. But also if my opponent puts a Lily's Pokédoll back in the active somehow, or put something like a Robo Substitute in the active, then I'll be able to use the Monkey Dory damage to KO. Yep, see, there it is, the Robo Substitute. So this is Curse Shovel. It says if I hit into the Xatu, I mill the top 2 cards of my deck. So you can see the strategy my opponent's going for here, where they're just trying to get rid of my whole deck. And I believe I prize my Iono as well, so that's going to be one card that can help me kind of put cards back into my deck if I end up getting a big hand. So with the addition of expanded cards, there's a lot of ways to get rid of cards out of your opponent's hand and their deck, and there's definitely a lot of more mill cards in the expanded format than there currently is in standard, especially tag team supporters like Bryson and Bellaba. And there's a counter catcher on the Kirlia, which is pretty unfortunate, and now we're here to play rock, paper, scissors, and you can't see it, but I win, so I end up drawing 3 cards, and my opponent's going to mill the top 3 cards of their deck. And what my opponent doesn't know is that I have a Guzma Hala in my hand, so and I just use that to search Float Stone. I don't want to thin my deck out of any more cards. The more cards I can leave in my deck, the better. So I use the Guzma Hala, I get the Float Stone to retreat my Kirlia into my Giratina. And now I'm going to use my Adrenabrain, and I'm going to move 3 damage counters over to my opponent's Mew, so I can potentially KO it later. And then I'm going to use the Shadow Impact to put 4 more damage counters on my Monkey Dory, and my Tina's going to stay in the active with a bunch of energy on top of it. So this additional pressure to be able to put on these like stall control mill decks is a really nice advantage that my deck can have, because normally you'd only be able to attack the active, so it gives your opponent more turns to be able to build a board and build their hand. But now that I have the additional damage of Monkey Dory moving over, I can limit the amount of turns my opponent has, right? So unfortunately with my misplay last turn, I am a prize behind, so technically I should be at 4 prizes on this turn. And my opponent's going to play this Mitch Fortune Sisters, and it's going to mill Scoop Up Net, which is actually an insanely good hit, because now it allows my opponent to have additional outs in trapping one of my Pokemon. So I'm going to do a different strategy here where I'm going to want to use my Shadow Impact, which says that if I attack with my Giratina, I have to put 4 damage counters on one of my Pokemon. So my thought process is here is I can put 4 damage counters on my Mew, so then that way if my opponent wants to trap my Mew, I can potentially KO it before he wants to take a prize card. So we see the Robo Substitute get promoted here as well. Xerneas is going to get benched. Xerneas is an attack for 1 Psychic Energy. Lets you get any card out of your discard pile. And there's the Coughing that's going to be doing most of the attacking here to be able to mill cards out of my deck. So I believe I have a Guzma in my hand, which is gold in this matchup because 1, it lets me pick off something my opponent wants to keep on their board to desperately to set up. But also it's going to allow me to not get stuck in the active with one of my other Pokemon. So here, I'm going to want to save this Guzma for as many turns as I possibly can. And then once I do use the Guzma, I want to get out of the discard pile as fast as possible. So my opponent plays Lavender Town here, which basically just says look at your opponent's hand. And then, yeah, that's it. Just look at your opponent's hand. I'm looking at it too. I'm like, wait, can I use this? My opponent goes, absolutely. So unfortunately for me, my opponent does end up field blowing away my Float Stone in Lavender Town, so I'm not able to look at my opponent's hand. And then there's a Psychic Energy attached to the Xerneas. Robo Substitute is going to delete itself, and then the Xerneas here is going to use the attack to get a discard or support out of, or any card on my opponent's discard pile, and they're going to go for the Lily's Determination or the Rockets. But it looks like with their low hand size, it's definitely look like the Lily is going to be the optimal play here. So let's see. You either refill your hand or you try to mill me. So it looks like, I think for me, I'd probably take the Lilies just to refill my hand. I'm going to have Lilies plus the Refinement plus draw for turn. So I'll be able to see a lot of cards next turn. But the funny thing is here, because I'm going to be able to use my Distortion Door Giratina to Shadow Impact and KO my own Mew, I can, 1, put U-Turn Board back into my hand, and I can also KO my Mew so my opponent can't trap it. So I get a pretty cool 2-prize turn here to be able to limit my opponent's time clock, but also because I made my opponent take a prize card here, Lily's only going to draw 6 cards instead of 8. So I thought that was a pretty cool play. Just thinking, okay, my opponent had the Lilies back. How can I punish that? And I'm going to do that here by making my opponent have 2 less cards in the hand. So I would say things are looking pretty grim for my opponent. I was able to play that Iono a few turns ago and kind of reset the hand and put a lot of cards back into my deck. So even if my opponent has something like Surge, Lusamine, Bryson, Bellabaman, it's going to not be enough. Even with the Coughing that mills, if it evolves in a Wheezing, it mills me 4 cards, right? My opponent's only going to really mill me 7 cards. So there is the Drowsy. Okay, and that's the end of this clip. Alright, and now, yeah, my opponent's going to bench this Drowsy. Play Lieutenant Surge's strategy, an extremely strong card in the expanded format that says if you're losing, you get to play 3 supporters, which is absolutely ridiculous card if this card was in standard. So, opponent's going to play Lieutenant Surge, play Cynthia Caitlin. Cynthia Caitlin says you can discard a card from your hand, add any supporter from your discard pile back to your hand, and then draw 3 cards. My opponent's going to add back Hex Maniac, it looks like, which is going to, again, get rid of all of my abilities, but at this point, it's going to be pretty rough for my opponent to mount a comeback because my Giratina is just sitting in the active and it's a thick boy. Let's see. Yeah, so my opponent really has no way of killing the Giratina. So my Giratina is pretty much just going to take a prize card here for free. And then I'm going to go down to 1 prize card. And then my opponent has to find a way for me to not take a prize card. It doesn't look like anything in their deck is above 130 HP to be able to sponge a hit from Giratina. And I believe this Drowsy just puts one of my Pokemon to sleep and brings one of my bench Pokemon to the active. But I believe I just have a Guzma. But I flip heads, but I don't think it ends up mattering because, like I said, I'm pretty sure I have Guzma in my hand. I also have Evolution U-Turn Board Psychic Energy. So yeah, I just retreat my Inkay out of the active spot here. And I am going to foolproof my board. So I'm going to attach a Psychic Energy. But I actually realized here that I am getting Hex Maniac, so I go, whoops, sorry, can't actually Psychic Recharge, but I'm going to still leave the U-Turn board on there, so then that way my Malamar and my Curly both only have 1 retreat cost, so that here, if my opponent wants to try to trap something, it'll be way easier for me to get it out of the active spot. So I just use a Shadow Impact here, take a prize card, go down to 1, and my opponent has to mill me like 15 cards here to be able to get me to lose, which seems pretty improbable at this point. I have a lot of cards in the deck. I'm putting a lot of pressure out. So if they don't end up using all of their cards to mill me out, then I show my opponent a hand of 0 items after they play Airy. They go for the confusion, and I just have Guzma, and that is game. So I'll start off 1-0 at GLC land. Alright, so this next clip, I actually forgot to hit record for turn 1, but this is my turn 2, and my opponent's playing an interesting water list as well. I lead the big old boulder, and I believe I just attach Psychic Energy and pass to it turn 1. And then turn 2, my opponent kind of sets up their board. I play Hex Maniac because I really have nothing going on here. My opponent only had 1 card in hand, so there's no way I was going to be able to match their hand size. And I believe my hand is pretty dead here as well. So my opponent is going to play an Irida, and they're also Hex Maniac, so there's no way for them to get any abilities into play. So my opponent is going to very smartly use this turn to just set up the board and just kind of give themselves more outs to play the game next turn. So right, the Rem Raid is going to come down, the Level Ball is also going to come down. I would have liked to probably see this Level Ball just get the Octillery, because I think here I am threatening a potential Frillish if I'm able to retreat my Iron Boulder. Unfortunately, my hand is so terrible that I just have to get the Mew to be able to try to play the game and just get more basics into play. And so I'm here, I'm going to use a Mysterious Tail. Mysterious Tail is going to grab me a VS Seeker, which doesn't really do too much here. I'm going to use a Mysterious Treasure. Hopefully this just grabs me another basic. I can grab something like Natu, or I can grab a Kirlia for the following turn if I wanted to. But there's so many options in the Psychic deck, it's really hard to kind of pinpoint what is the optimal play a lot of the time. But my opponent's Bruxish is an interesting card. He says it's the worst card in his deck, so I don't imagine it'll be staying in this deck too much longer. But also to note, my opponent had a pretty bad turn 1. I believe they won the die roll, I went first, and they used a Peony to discard a pretty good amount of resources from their deck, which I believe the biggest one was going to be the double colorless energy, or the double turbo energy, which you'll see why in the future it is actually a big deal. This deck looks pretty normal to be at the start, at this right now where we're at, minus the Bruxish, definitely an odd card, but it actually ended up saving him. So what we'll find out here is that this is actually a damage counter water deck. So look at this, because that's not the normal Frostlass deck plays. Usually this deck plays the Frostlass, lets you attach as many water energy from your hand to your bench Pokemon as you'd like, but this version is a little bit different. It's going to be playing a lot of spread and damage counter moving cards to be able to take multiple prize cards in a row, or across, like, one big turn, kind of like how my deck does. So it's a pretty innovative list. I've never seen anything like this before. So if my opponent's the pioneer of this deck, like, congrats to them. And I mean, whoever's made this deck, congrats, because this is a very interesting water list. So you're going to see the retreat here into the Frostmoth. And so I roll for the heads. So my Mew is still awake, thankfully, but all my Pokemon are going to take 20 damage here, which is pretty scary because my Natu only has 40 HP. So it could definitely get rough in the future if my Natu doesn't get to evolve here, but I believe I have a Pokepad in my hand, unless I spent it last turn. So I'm looking, and I'm going to grab Marnie off of the Pokegear here, and then I'm going to just play the Marnie here, I believe. Yeah, so I'm put it on the bottom of the deck, draw 5 cards, and then boom, boom, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I benched the Mr. Mime, which is exactly what I needed here. Otherwise, my Natu was going to have a pretty horrible death here. And then I get to use my Mew afterwards for the Rescue Stretcher, to be able to get a Pokemon out of my discard pile if I needed it. So I'm looking at my discard pile if there's anything I can really do here. And am I able to potentially get this knockout Iron Boulder? But unfortunately, I am not. So I'm going to pass back over to my opponent. And my opponent's going to reveal some more of their fun cards here. We see the Aqua Patch to be able to go to the Drizzle. And so that we know that Inteleon's coming sooner than later. Alright, we see a potential Guzma being played for my opponent here to maybe want to trap some. The Luxurious Cape comes down here, which is a pretty big deal because now this Frostmoth is 210 HP, which is going to be out of range of my Iron Boulder to KO it. Also, Hilda's going to come down here. We'll see what that wants to grab. We see the Inteleon, which is pretty big, to be able to now further my opponent's board. Say they can get any 2 trainers they want from the deck. So this can be, you know, ways to get more Pokemon out of the deck, some more searching cards, kind of thin the deck out a little bit. And it looks like the Inteleon is going to grab a copy of Nest Ball and Pokepad, it looks like, potentially, just to be able to fill those last couple of bench slots out. And Nest Ball or Pokepad is going to grab a copy of Snorunt. And is the Nest Ball not going to... Oh, the Nest Ball got the Snorunt. And it looks like maybe the Pokepad is going to be saved for the next turn. And it looks like I ended up rolling tails, so my Mew is asleep. But thankfully, only my Mew in the active spot is going to get KO'd here. So here I'm looking to probably get, yep, Monkey Dory down. And now I'm going to want to potentially, so yeah, I'm going to move those 3 damage counters over. And they're probably going to go to Octillery. Yep, that's exactly what I end up doing. I want to cut off my opponent's draw power, because now that the Inteleon on my opponent's board is fully evolved, I know they can't use that to search out anymore. So if I'm able to get something like a, what's the word? If I'm able to get like an Iono or an End-to-Stick, my opponent not having Octillery in play is going to be a pretty big deal. It looks like my Malamar is prized there, but I don't prize any basic Pokemon I'm able to get off of the Hisuian Heavy Ball. And I'm going to just pass here. Thankfully, with the Monkey Dory saving my Mew's life there, I can use this Mew a couple more times potentially. But it looks like I'm just I'm struggling to set up. My opponent's kind of bullying my board. And yeah, I would have really liked there to get an Iron Boulder attack in. And we see the Guzma up to KO my Monkey Dory, which is a huge deal here, because now with the Frostlass coming down, it's going to tick my whole board. My opponent's thinking about reset stamping me with a bunch of cards. And it would be pretty devastating because I have so many cards in my hand currently. But it looks like my opponent's going to want to save it for another turn. And then, yep, all the damage counters come down, promote the Mew. And let's see what I want to go for here. My opponent's got 6 cards in hand, which I can use the Iron Boulder to KO this Inteleon because it's only 160 HP. So it's definitely a prime target I'm going to want to KO with my Iron Boulder. So I just need to match hand sizes, so I'm going to grab back that Monkey Dory. And now with the addition of the Psychic Energy off of the Clara, I can use that Clairvoyant Sense to be able to potentially match hand sizes with my opponent. And I look at my hand, okay, rebench the Monkey Dory with the attach for turn. And then I can use Adrenabrain to move 3 damage counters over to my opponent's board. So I'm probably going to move them off of the Xatu here. So my Xatu can not be in range of getting KO'd by a potential devolution. If my opponent's playing like Devo TM, they can KO my Xatu that way, which would be pretty scary. And so I think there was a ruling. I just wanted to ask if I was able to discard a card off of Mysterious Garden if I had more than 6 cards in hand. Unfortunately, I discard my blind side here, so I go to the same amount of cards in hand as my opponent, which is pretty unfortunate because I could potentially use that later in the game to take 2 prize cards. But, you know, you got to do what you got to do sometimes. My opponent's got a big threat in the active, and I want to be able to KO it. So, yeah, my opponent is going to play Silent Lab here, which is pretty detrimental for me because now it's going to Silent Lab says that all basic Pokemon in play have no abilities. So now my Mr. Mime is going to get turned off here, unfortunately. So now my whole board is going to feel the wrath of this big Frostmoth. And we see End's Vanillux come down, which is going to be the finisher of this deck, where End's Vanillux, it's Vanillish, Vanillite, and Vanillux, I believe. So Vanillux, the big one, has an attack for 2 colorless energy that doubles all the damage counters on your opponent's board. So if that comes down, I know it's basically death for me. So I definitely have to start healing my board. Something like Scoop Up Net would be really nice. So I believe I use a Scoop Up Net here on the Mr. Mime to be able to heal that. And I'm going to have to use my Monkey Dory here to heal some of my guys down. So I had 4 prize cards here. My map is definitely going to include KOing this Frostmoth for 2 prize cards. So I think what my game strategy here is I can hit this thing for 170, but then I can also use my Monkey Dory to move 3 damage counters over to put it at 200. So that the next turn I can bench a Frillish, use Frillish to swing into the Frostmoth, and then that way I can KO my opponent, take 2 prize cards because of the Luxurious Cape, and then my opponent's also item locked, so their big swing turn is going to be significantly harder. Alright, so here, I'm going to use Arvid. Arvid's going to grab VS Seeker and that U-turn board. And I'm thinking, okay, well, I use my scoop up net, so it might potentially be hard for me to get Iron Boulder out of the active. So if I have to use a potential Guzma, that's always an option. And then, yep, I'm going to move 3 damage counters off Xatu. Probably just put them onto... I actually put them onto Vanillux. So I'm actually going to check my opponent here and say, if you don't evolve this Vanillux, it's just going to die. I think this is a fine play, because I can just do it next turn, I guess, right? I'm hitting this for 170. I still have all this damage on my board, and then next turn I can just move 30 to Frostmoth and 20 on the Frillish. So actually, I think this plays better than the one I assumed that I did to begin with. So you see, that's in-game me more locked in than post-com me. So, yeah, shout out to Past Dan. And yeah, so this thing's got 170 on it, so it's only got 40 HP left. So a potential Monkey Dory, Adrenabrain, plus a Frillish attack is going to be able to KO it and put me down to 2 prize cards. My opponent has already taken a singular prize card, so they still have to take 5 here, which, I mean, my board's eyeing it up pretty nicely. The Lucamine's going to come down, which is going to grab back Guzma and Silent Lab. Silent Lab is the most annoying card for sure in this matchup, and it's going to be paired with Reset Stamp. So Reset Stamp just says that your opponent shuffles their hand into their deck and then draws for as many prize cards as they have remaining. So I'm going to have 4 prize cards left, so I'm going to draw 4 cards. Thankfully, it looks like I draw Gardevoir there, which is nice. It's going to take my Kirlia out of range of being KO'd by the damage counter shenanigans, so at least I don't have to worry about that as much. But because this Frostmoth is in the active here, it's going to just blow up my whole board and put 20 damage counters on, or 2 damage counters on everything, which is the equivalent of 20 damage. 20 damage counters would just win the game here, if it's something like the Espeon and Deoxys tag team of before. So I roll heads there. So thankfully my Iron Boulder is awake and I'm able to... so yeah, the Silent Lab is going to negate the Mr. Mime, so it actually doesn't take any damage from the Frostmoth, or the Frostlass, because it technically does not have an ability. So here, rule number 1 is I'm looking for a stadium to potentially bump my opponent's Silent Lab, because I need this Mr. Mime back in action as soon as possible. But I do have the ability to use Refinement, and I do have the ability to use the Xatu, and I can evolve my Kirlia into a Gardevoir and draw 2 more cards from that as well. Let's see. This Kirlia is running a little bit low on health, so yep, I think I used Guzma Hollow there to just search Artisan. And then I believe here I'm going to attach Counter Energy to retreat. Oh, there we go. There's Gardevoir. And then Counter Energy is probably going to come down to just retreat this Iron Boulder. It's a very low chance after this KO that I'm going to be behind at all. So this is just me checking my opponent and saying, listen, bud, if you don't win the game in the next like 1 or 2 turns, it's going to be really rough, because I'm going to go down to 2 prizes. I'm going to start item locking you. So it's going to be hard for my opponent to pick up, you know, big swing turns without items, especially in control decks or mill decks. They're going to want to use those item cards to use stuff like Counter Catcher or like Night Stretcher to just kind of recur their Pokemon. But it looks like here my opponent's actually going to go for an Inteleon attack to KO my Frillish, which is fine with me, because then I can bring up another one of my Pokemon and take a KO onto my opponent's active. With this 20 damage that's on the Drizzle, my opponent's active Inteleon's only going to have 140 HP. After one more tick with the Frostlass, it goes to 130 at the end of my opponent's turn, and then at the end of my turn it goes to 120. So all I need to do 120 damage to this Inteleon, so, you know, not too bad. I think it's pretty doable to be able to KO this Inteleon. There is a counter gain and a Pokemon League headquarters grabbed here by the Inteleon. The League headquarters just says that all basic Pokemon in play require 1 more energy to attack. Unfortunately, all of my basics in play are my attackers. I could potentially attack with Gardevoir. It's not the most unreasonable thing to get to, especially if I have a Xatu and something like Psychic Patch left. But looking at my deck, it's pretty thin, and I think I was worried here about running out of energy to win the game. So there is the counter gain attached to Inteleon, which is going to count as colorless energy, and it's going to KO my Frillish, unfortunately. So I do have to find a way to take 2 prize cards here with a pretty minimal amount of resources. I think I'm looking at my discard pile and just kind of thinking what my best play is here. My opponent's going to take this KO, and I attach an energy to Mr. Mime from the last turn so I can use it as a pivot. And then, yep, all of the pings are going to come down. And yeah, my Zatu's looking pretty low on HP. Thankfully, Monkidori can survive another turn. My Mr. Mime is also pretty low on HP. So I have to decide here what I want to save, because I can either save Mr. Mime or I can save the Zatu. I think it's a tough decision here to make, because right, one's my energy acceleration and the other one is protecting my board from just getting absolutely destroyed by my opponent's Frostmoth. So I think I just sack the Mime here, because I think, okay, well, if my opponent's going to use the Inteleon to KO me anyway, like, that's fine. And I think my win condition here is going to be to take a prize card on the Vanillix with Monkidori damage, as well as KOing my opponent's Snom with a potential Mind Bend, which I don't think my opponent saw that line, because I think they still have that Guzma in their hand. But I think I reset the hand here. I think I have, yeah, I have that Iono, and that's going to be a pretty big swing in my favor to kind of take away my opponent's combo turns. So I'm going to use my Monkidori to take 3 damage counters off of Zatu and put them onto the Vanillux. So as long as my opponent does not take another KO, then, or my opponent does not evolve the Vanillux, I can potentially KO it next turn. Attach the U-turn more into the Zatu because my blindside is now gone, so I can't do that combo anymore. I'm going to draw 2 cards off of my Iono, put my opponent down to 3, it looks like. And I believe here I just pass. I think I draw Guzma and Psychic Patch here. And my goal here is that if I'm able to, because my prize card is Field Blower, one of them at least, right? And I can't attack because of the tax of the headquarters. So my thought is, okay, if I can get Malamar, I can Psychic Recharge to Monkidori, or I can Psychic Patch to it, and then I can potentially take a prize card off of the Mind Bend attack to be able to KO my opponent's Snom. So playing the Iono here is really nice because it's going to potentially stop my opponent from getting that big Frostmoth into play. There's a Quick Ball away on the Empoleon. Empoleon is going to grab, it looks like a copy, or the Quick Ball away the Empoleon is going to just get failed. And I believe the ability on Empoleon is if it's the only card in your hand, you can play it and then draw 3 cards. And so my opponent, I think realizes that after. And then my opponent very smartly does not KO my Mr. Mime from attacking. They let it die to the Frostlass damage. Incredibly smart play for my opponent. That way I'm not able to use something like Raihan or Teammates. But yeah, the game just comes down to this turn. I have to win this turn or the game is pretty cooked. And I do a really sick play here, I think. So I have to pray. I tell my opponent one of my prize cards is Field Blower, and I have to take that prize card to win. So I go for the Giratina, I Distortion Door, 1 on the Snom, 1 on the Vanillux. Vanillux now goes to 70 damage, and then I Monkidori, and I KO it with the damage, and then I'm able to use Psychic Patch to attach to Monkidori, and then Mind Bend the Snom for KO, and I move to 2-0 here. Alright, as we move into round 3, we're at the flagship matchup of the format, I believe, which is going to be Psychic versus Fighting. Now, Fighting and Psychic are considered the 2 best decks in the game currently, 1A and 1B. I personally believe Psychic is the best deck. I don't even know if anyone's going to disagree with you. Even post-bans, I believe that this matchup is a little bit closer now. I think it's like 65 or 60-40 in the favor of Psychic. Maybe you can argue it's like 55-45 now, because Fighting's got a couple more tools, and now with the ban of Dimension Valley, Psychic can maybe not get ahead in the early game easily. So if these 2 decks are trading prize cards, Psychic pretty much always wins. Fighting is really good into the Psychic deck if they're able to get like 2 turns ahead. But I opened the Frillish, which is pretty nice. I could use the Frillish here to item lock my opponent, and it's really tough for the Fighting deck to be able to KO a Frillish turn 2. There is Fighting Fairy Belt and there is Muscle Band, which are both cards that can get you that extra little bit of damage to be able to KO Frillish, but under the item lock, it could be tough to get that card into your hand. There's something like Adventure Bag that you could play. There's just a lot of cards in Expanded that can search tools. And my hope here is my opponent does not get Fighting Muscle Band or Fighting plus the Fury Belt, and I'm able to potentially just get another turn out of this Frillish. Frillish is usually just used to buy turns to set up. Usually every game that Psychic can set up, it usually can win, unless your opponent's playing a different kind of alternate win con deck. So The Barbaracle is going to come down here, and also there's an Aurora Energy discarding a Pokepad to get an energy onto the Solrock. And then Brooklyn Hill is going to get played here for the Okie Dokie, and my Frillish did exactly what it was supposed to do. It bought me a singular turn to be able to get a better setup. So it also puts 40 damage on my opponent's Solrock, which one puts it in range of Blindside, but then it makes it a little bit easier to KO with Monkey Dory math later, because it goes from 110 to 90 and then 90 to 70. So then that is 2 Monkey Dory pings and a Giratina ping. So looks like I play, I believe it's Guzma Hala, looks like, yep, because I'm going to get a Stadium, a Special Energy, and I'm going to get a Tool. I believe my U-turn board is prized this game, so I go for the Float Stone. I'm debating on what Stadium to get here. Looks like I'm going to grab Mysterious Garden, and then the Float Stone as well. So here I can use a Telepathic Energy onto one of my Pokemon to be able to accelerate more Psychic Pokemon onto my bench. So I use the Distortion Ore and Giratina to be able to get the Natu and the Iron Boulder out of my deck. Unfortunately, I don't have an energy to combo here with the Mysterious Garden, draw some more cards, but that's fine here. I have a pretty solid board. It looks like I'm holding an Iono, so yeah, waiting for my opponent to KO this Frillish. Then I can Iono him down lower and start attacking with a potential Giratina. And like I said, as long as I'm able to keep these knockouts streaming, I should be fine in the prize trade, because usually Psychic can cheese at the end of the game with that Blindside to take an additional prize card, or use something like Blacephalon to kind of KO my opponent's board. And I see the Aurora Energy there. Aurora Energy, very cool card. It says you can discard a energy or a card from your hand. It's a Rainbow Energy for one of your Pokemon without an additional downside. It used to be cool back in the Lugia days. You could use it to like discard an Archeops, which is pretty neat. All right, and then I'm going to use an Iono here to reset my hand. I'm looking for some stage 1s here. It looks like I'm going to see a Night Stretcher. Night Stretcher can grab me a Psychic Energy to use the Clairvoyant Sense on my Xatu. And then I can use the Pokepad to search Malamar, and then that is going to grab me that last Psychic Energy out of my discard pile. It looks like I play Mysterious Treasure here, and it looks like that's going to grab the Monkey Dory. So now I can put some damage counters on my Monkey Dory to move them back over later with my Shadow Impact attack. Yep, put 40 damage on my Monkey Dory. I think this is actually a small misplay. I think the 40 damage should have actually gone to Iron Boulder, because now if my opponent has Energy Boss's Order, they can KO my Monkey Dory, because Solrock actually ignores weakness and resistance. So, small misplay there, but I know that now, so now I know to just throw that on that bad boy Iron Boulder, because even if my opponent has Energy Muscle Band, it does not KO. That's only 90 damage. 90 plus 40 is 130. Iron Boulder's got 140 HP, so something to definitely keep in mind for the future. And I see the Marshadow come down here. Marshadow is pretty scary as well. Also, putting the 4 damage counters on the Iron Boulder does play around the Marshadow. Thankfully, most Psychic Pokemon have a minus 30 to fighting Pokemon, so the Marshadow is going to be significantly harder to get that full value out of it by KOing a Pokemon. But it looks like the Marshadow is going to come up with the addition of the Premium Power Pro is actually going to KO my Monkey Dory, unfortunately. But with the help of something like Guzma, I can get around the Marshadow. I mentioned Mr. Mime here because I don't know if my opponent plays Ting Lu or not. It's generally in these fighting decks. Yep, I'm going to Guzma up my opponent's Barbaracle. This is going to prevent my opponent from getting more Okie Dokie setup or additional high energy attackers. So yep, I'm going to attack with the Giratina. I learned my lesson. I put the 4 damage counters onto the Iron Boulder. And yeah, now here I'm still caught up in the prize trade. Thankfully, I had the Guzma there to be able to get around Marshadow, or it basically just buys my opponent a free turn, which then they can kind of set up more, build a stronger board, and then it'll be harder for me to keep up that way. So, see the Arvin get played here, and I believe it's going to grab an Escape Rope of my opponent's, and I'm thinking, okay, so Marshadow does 60 damage and plus 20 damage on the Strong Energy, plus 20 damage on the Muscle Man is 100, but because Iron Boulder is minus 30 resistance to fighting Pokemon, I'm only going to take 70 damage from it. The downside is I have to put this fat boy Iron Boulder into the active, but I believe I'm holding Versus Seeker in my hand, which is why I make this play, because now I can use Versus Seeker for Guzma, and then just get this Marshadow out of the active. Also getting my Iron Boulder out of the active, so I can look at my opponent's board. I can, potentially KO Makuhita if I don't want to deal with a Gust from my opponent. If my opponent benches another attacker, I can potentially KO that as well with the Guzma. There's the Fighting Fury Belt, and the 70 damage is going to be 80, so my Iron Boulder is going to live with 20 HP. He's a trooper. All right, so I think it's pretty much a no-brainer here that I'm going to use Guzma, VS Seeker for Guzma, and I'm going to KO the Marshadow. It's the only thing on my opponent's board that has any energy on it, and I can potentially lose to it later in the game now that I've used Guzma and my VS Seeker, and I use my Cynthia Caitlyn turn 1, so I can't Sinlin again for the Guzma to use it a third time. So I'm going to KO the Marshadow here just so that my opponent doesn't do anything silly, especially with the combination of the Makuhita. It can evolve into Hariyama and then take a KO that way as well. So as you can see, this Ralts has been sitting here the whole game unevolved because I did prize my Kirlia, and spoiler alert, it is my 6th prize card. So this Ralts just kind of sits here the whole game. I think with this matchup, it's like fine to just pre-bench the Ralts, because if you ever take a KO and rip the Kirlia, you want to put it into play right away. So I think this is fine. You don't really need a huge revolving door of attackers in this matchup, because you can kind of just use Giratina over and over again. So that's the nice thing about Psychic, is you have an infinite recurring attacker that puts damage counters on your board for Munkidori to move back over. And potentially next turn, right, I can even attack with the Iron Boulder and bench Munkidori and put a Dark Energy on it, so I can start moving damage counters to my opponent's board. So you see that Lunatone on the bench already has 10 damage on it, so it's a premium blindside target. So if I move 3 damage counters over to the Makuhita, I can also potentially get the Hariyama in range of the blindside as well by, moving the 3 damage counters over the Munkidori and then using a Giratina ping later in the game, which will put it at 4, which is exact math to be able to KO it. There's a Cynthia and Caitlyn discarding Professor's Research, and it looks like it's going to add back that trusty Guzma. Guzma, one of the best cards ever, just like the most perfect Gust effect. And then the reset stamp comes down, so I'm going to lose my hand. It looks like it was like 7 or 8 cards. I'm going to go down to 3, but at least, I still have Xatu in play, so it can help me find some more cards. Looks like I draw a Dark Energy, and I'm not sure what the other cards were. Wasn't able to see him. Drew through him pretty fast. I see a Rescue Stretcher, and I see a potential Clara. So my opponent's got 8 cards in hand. Oh, it's an N. Okay, so N's going to help a lot if I want to potentially use like an Iron Boulder to attack and one-shot this Solrock. Solrock does have 150 HP currently, so my Giratina actually cannot KO it. So looks like I'm saving the potential N for next turn. Now, how much with the damage count on the active? My Giratina is basically dead anyway, so there's no point in really, preserving the HP on it. I'm fine with it dying. But now this Solrock has a ton of damage on it. Potentially next turn I can use Munkidori to KO it, and then I can combo that with a potential attack from Iron Boulder, be able to take multiple prizes. So here I actually do have a misplay, because I do believe I have a Psychic Energy in my discard pile. So I could have preemptively used Psychic Recharge to put an energy on Mr. Mime and use that as a pivot for the following turn, because my Floatstone is gone, and I believe my U-turn board is still in the prize cards. So I think, yeah, 2 of my last 3 prize cards are Kirlia and that U-turn board. So a lot of moving pieces with GLC decks, so sometimes you just don't see all those things. So, cut me some slack. It's been a long day. So yeah, I'm thinking to myself here, bro, I should have just attached a stupid energy to the Mr. Mime. It would have been fine. Promote Mr. Mime anyway, knowing he's probably never gonna get out of the active spot. He's probably just gonna die there. I'm going to go for what I believe is a Psychic Recharge. I can go Psychic Recharge on a Boulder and then attach an energy for turn onto my Mr. Mime. But actually what I do is I attach an energy to Mr. Mime here. I'm going to put 3 damage counters onto my opponent's Solrock. See if I rip the U-turn board off of the prize card. And here I'm just going to play the N. And I'm going to reset both of our hands. My opponent's got 3 prize cards. I got 2. So even if my opponent takes the prize card here and KOs my Mr. Mime, I'll still be in an okay spot, because I'll still be even on the prize trade. So draw 2 cards is, it is Counter Energy and Strange Timepiece, both pretty useless cards. And yeah, I'm going to hope that my opponent's Makuhita is just going to get stuck in the active spot here. Then there's a Karina grab, then I'm like, oh, that's not good. Now this big boy is going to be able to get out of the active spot. So Karina's going to search the opponent's deck for a Fighting Energy and a Fighting Pokemon. or sorry, a fighting Pokemon and an item. So it's like Irida of the old formats. See the energy retrieval come down in addition with the Barbaracle. So this means that my opponent can now attach 2 energy from the discard pile onto their board with the use of their attach return, plus the Barbaracle's ability. I believe it's Stone Arms. So first Stone Arms is going to come down and let that Okidogi go up to the full potential. But my opponent does not have a way to retreat, so I did buy myself a turn there. But it looks like my hand is super dead, so I just go for a Psychic Recharge onto Xatu, so I can potentially use a Blindside later in the game to win the game, and I just pass here. Nothing really for me to do here. Unfortunately, my opponent did get back that Guzma, so there is one lingering in the deck, and it's going to get played here to KO my Xatu, which is very unfortunate for me, because now my opponent's going down to 2 prizes. I'm going to go down to 2 prizes, and yeah, I can use the Monkey Dory here as a potential pivot. And it looks like my hand is a Mew, and yeah, my hand's just a bunch of nothing currently. So I'm going to have to hope this Mew can hit me something like a Pokegear, or I think I already used VS Seeker, so I don't think that's an option. So I'm just kind of weighing my options if it's worth it to use the Mew. So I'm going to take this, I'm going to move 3 damage counters over to my opponent's, yeah, they move it over to the Lunatone, put some more damage counters, retreat into Mew, use the Mew. Mew's going to grab me the Pokegear. So I'm going to look at the top 7, and I'm going to look at the top 7 again, baby. All right, look at the top 7, hoping for a solid supporter here. And it looks like I can grab a potential teammates. I think Hexmaniac was in there as well. Not going to further my board state, so definitely looking at something like the teammates to kind of refill my hand. Something like a Lily would be really good here. I don't want to use anything like N or Iono because I want to gain cards. I'm at the point of the game where if I do get that blindside attack down, I can just win the game. Ooh, so looking at, oh, it's a tough one. I can get the Clara to potentially get some resources back into my hand, but I actually go for the teammates. I'm going to teammates here. I think I wanted to go for Scoop Up Net because I could have gone for Scoop Up Net and then KO with Iron Boulder, but I think my last 2 prize cards are Scoop Up Net plus Curlia. So I go, oh, that's a small goof there. So looking here, I think I'm going to go for Clara plus Psychic Patch because I want to be able to get the Blindside down next turn. So yeah, I'm going to go for Clara plus the Psychic Patch because this is going to guarantee me a way to use the Natu plus the Blindside. So if my opponent doesn't disrupt my hand, I'm in a good spot. But my opponent has used that reset stamp, and usually fighting does not play a lot of ways of disrupting the hand because it's going to be more of an aggro-focused deck. It's not like Psychic, where Psychic is very mid-rangey. But I believe I just have the full combo in my hand here, right? I got Natu, I got Energy, I got Psychic Patch, I have Malamar. So I just have to sequence this correctly and the game is over. I go for the Clara. Clara is going to get back a Natu and a Dark Energy. I can use the Psychic Recharge on the Malamar, attach the Blindside, and then attach Counter Energy, and then shoot that, what is this one, Lunatone in the corner for the KO and take 2 prize cards. All right, and we have the final game of the day. I'm actually playing against my homie Gage, and he's on the fighting deck that he recently got top 4 at the Full Grip 6K with. So he now ties DeAndre for the 2nd best placing for the GLC events. So, you know what I mean? Him and DeAndre gotta, next one, man. One of y'all gotta outplace the other one. Someone's gotta get 2nd or win. So, yeah, we always, just bust each other's chops with that. So, yeah, Gage, really phenomenal finish in the last 6K with this same 60, I believe, or 59. I don't know if he's played the same exact list, to be honest, but I assume it's close, right? If you were winning with it, why change it? But the hand, not super solid from Gage here. There is an Artisan that is in the hand, but with my weak start, Gage elects not to use the Artisan. I think if I was Gage, I would have used it here because of the Hilda in the hand. The hand is dead. So something like a Barbaracle could have come, or what is the little one? Binnacle. A Binnacle could have came out here to do the draw 2 attack, which would have been perfect because, like I said, Gage's hand's super dead. But Gage, like you said, without developing a huge board here, even like using Artisan to grab Soul Rock and then using the Artisan and then using Artisan next turn to grab Lunatone in combination with Hilda could grab a basic fighting energy that could draw 3 cards that way as well. So if you didn't want to commit to putting Binnacle in the active, that is another thought process that I had. But the problem with Okidogi is it doesn't eat up 2 hits in this matchup. It's only going to eat 1. So it's pretty bad to rely on the Okidogi sticking for multiple turns, which I think was what Gage's original game plan was. But because I have Iron Boulder down, I can just kind of body the Okidogi, right? It's going to do 340 damage with the weakness. So even if Okidogi is buffed to a higher HP amount, the game is the game, right? You got that little corner icon that says Psychic, so you're going to get cooked by any Psychic Pokemon. So I got the U-turn board here for the Inkay, and then I also have a Guzma Hala. Guzma Hala is going to allow me to refill my hand. I'm going to get rid of Guzma and Curlia here, which is pretty unfortunate because those are very strong cards. But wait, did I discard 3 cards for Guzma Hala? I definitely just discarded 3 cards for Guzma Hala like a dummy. So yeah, now I realize, okay, so kids at home, Guzma Hala only discards 2 cards to search your deck for a special energy, a stadium, and a tool. But yeah, my dumbass just discarded 3 cards. So I could have kept that Curlia in my hand, actually, to be able to evolve it next turn. But I don't think it actually matters, because, right, if I can just not search one of the pieces, and then I can still keep 3 cards in the hand. So I actually don't think the goof here matters. But yeah. Yeah, because it's actually just only advantageous here for me to keep the Curly in my hand to evolve it the following turn, right? So, yeah, small goof here. I have to keep 3 cards in my hand, so I'm going to attach the Telepathic Energy. Yeah, this is so silly, right? Because, yeah, I could have just attached the Floatstone to one of my bench Pokemon or put the Stadium into play, had 3 cards in hand, get Curlia, or get Ralts, get Xatu, and then just had Curlia for next turn. So, yeah, my blunder here actually ends up working in Gage's favor. And then, yep, my Boulder gets the turn 2 attack and blows up the... what is the guy? Okidogi in the active. And now Gage is pretty much forced to put the Artisan into play. I mean, I already have 3 basics, so, you know, you might as well just put this big boy into play and just thin your deck out of some more Pokemon. If you go down 2 prizes of Psychic, that's when it's pretty much cooked. But, you know, you never say never. You can always top deck like something like a Lilies, and then you're kind of just back into the game. I mean, if Gage goes to a 0-card hand here, like, that's very good. So let's see. Looking at my hand, I have a Monkey Dory. Yeah, Gage going to a 0-card hand is going to be pretty difficult to match. But I go for the Night Stretcher for Curlia here. And then I have to attach Floatstone to something. Floatstone's probably just going to get attached to the Curlia. I'm going to use Artisan here, can thin another Pokemon out of my deck as well. I need to somehow get to 0 cards in hand to be able to attack again. But I mean, after that, the game is pretty much over. Because even if Gage attacks into my Boulder and KOs it, my board is probably set up enough that I'll be able to chain back-to-back attackers. And yep, here I can attach the Floatstone to my Mew. And then I can play that Stretcher. Stretcher can get rid of the Artisan in my hand, evolve in a Xatu, and then Iron Boulder KO. And then Gage is going to actually tell, he's like, if I don't top deck a supporter or a special energy, I'm just going to scoop. But here he's able to get the Okidogi down with the full unlocked ability now to be able to do that extra damage and get the extra HP. KOs my Iron Boulder. So the game's not over yet. I draw here, it's Scoop Up Net. Not the most useful card here, but I can see a lot of cards here with the combination of Mew plus Curlia. I debate here on using the Artisan first before the Mew. Can thin a potential card out of my deck, right? So, because Iron Boulder is in my discard pile now, I think I unfortunately have to use my Artisan to get Giratina, which means I don't use it for the full effect. I could Scoop Up Net this Giratina potentially as well to then trade it away, but we'll see what I get off of the Mew first, if that's a potential play. Because, right, I can get the Earthen Vessel, and that's a really good top deck that I have now with the... So I think I actually should have done here, this is a small misplay as well, is instead of Vesseling away the Scoop Up Net, I should have Scoop Up Netted the Tina and then Vesseled away the Tina. That way I could have got the damage counters down. So another small misplay there that could have let me get a damage counter on a Soul Rock, damage counter on a Lunatone, and now they're both susceptible to the blind side later in the game. But you can see, like, the amount of cards Psychic can see is crazy, right? I got a Psychic Energy, drew 2 cards off Xatu, drew 2 cards off of the Curlia, and then, yeah, I get Pokegear off of one of the draws. Pokegear is going to grab me Marnie. Then I can play my supporter for the turn. There's Psychic Patch plus attach for turn. And then I'm going to KO Okidogi, get 4 damage counters onto my Monkey Dory. And yeah, my opponent, Gage's top deck's Field Blower, and the game's just over there. But yeah, I ended up going undefeated at another Good Games event with Psychic. Now that I've, you know, won my post-rotation, or not post-rotation, my post-ban list Psychic event, I can now play different types. So let me know what you guys want me to play in the comments down below. Do you want me to play one of the goofier types? The only type I believe I can't build is Fairy, because it needs so many random weird old cards, and I'm not buying cards for Fairy, but I believe I can play pretty much every other deck. So just let me know what you guys want to play in the comments, and yeah, I'll rock it up to full grip, into Good Games in another 2 weeks. Man, I've been talking for an hour, can't you tell? All right, well, appreciate you watching if you stuck out to the end of the video, and for more GLC content, you know, leave me a like. Peace.